The concept of Daleks in the past is a great idea, well at least in principle. However, with the exception of Evil of the Daleks, it's also a tricky one. Stephen Moffat found that out with the first Dalek story of his tenure, Victory of the Daleks, bringing the Daleks to the Second World War. However, Rusty Davies tried telling a Dalek story set in the past as part of the show's third season. Departing of the Ways had featured a Dalek story set in the future, while Doomsday saw the Fiends lay siege to modern-day London. Placing the Daleks in 1930s New York seems a staggeringly ambitious proposition, but one that they seem to want to try anyway. Indeed, Daleks in Manhattan and Evolution of the Daleks are two very ambitious episodes, and for that I'm inclined to be forgiving. Throughout the second series, there was a sense that Doctor Who was resting on its laurels, with the reintroduction of the Cybermen and Rise of the Cybermen feeling like it was done on autopilot. For the most part, the third season is a lot more ambitious. That means there's much more room for failures, but the potential for successful dramatically increases. Daleks in Manhattan would be ambitious from a production standpoint today. Stephen Moffat has been able to bring the characters over to the United States for location shooting on stories like The Impossible Astronaut, Day of the Moon, A Town Called Mercy, and The Angels Take Manhattan, to name a few. In contrast, the only overseas work on Daleks in Manhattan in Evolution of the Daleks involved secondary crew, leaving all the scenes starring the regular cast to be shot in the United Kingdom. Replicating New York and Cardiff is a daunting enough task. The task is compounded by the historical setting. However, the ambition of Daleks in Manhattan runs a great deal deeper than that. It's the first two-part Dalek story that isn't a season finale, and it's the first mid-season Dalek episode since Dalek re-established the monster as a threat. That's a hefty burden for a story, but Daleks in Manhattan finds itself a bit overburdened. Not only does it have to tell a Dalek story, it has to feature pigmen, deal with the Great Depression and its impact on ordinary people, insert a musical number, include the Empire State Building, and serve as a homage to 1930s American horror films. It sounds more like a laundry list than an episode, in all honesty. It's hard not to feel sorry for Helen Rayner, tasked with writing the two-parter, the first female writer since the reintroduction of the series, I must add. For one thing, the episode was apparently originally intended for Stephen Moffat, but he was unable to do it. With a number of Dalek stories in his era, it's clear to see that Moffat isn't too fond of the creatures and doesn't really know what to do with them, so I'm kind of glad in a way. Rayner worked as script editor on the revived show, and has actually worked a great deal in theatre and television. She's actually since proven herself as a very fine Doctor Who writer, producing the Sontaran Stratagem and the Poison Sky for the fourth series. It was just that Daleks in Manhattan may have been the worst possible first script for Rayner to write for Doctor Who. To be fair, a lot of the problems with the two-parter only really become obvious in Evolution of the Daleks, and there are a wealth of good ideas here. Aside from the treatment of the Daleks themselves, there's a host of good stuff here. There's just too much of it. The result is an episode that feels like it's running around trying to check off items on a list before the end of the credits start rolling, and never slows down to appreciate any of it. It's a bit muddled, lacking a clear voice. Given that Terry Nation created the Daleks to serve as stand-ins for the Nazis, you imagine it'd be easy enough for them to stand in 1930s New York. After all, there was a fair amount of fascist sympathy to be found in New York at the time, lurking beneath the surface. The German-American Bund held a rally in Madison Square Garden, attended by 20,000 people in 1939. There's a host of unpleasant connections and ideological links to be unearthed with a story set in the years before the Second World War, but just nothing happens. Interestingly enough, Daleks in Manhattan completely avoids exploring that avenue. Instead, it approaches the issue of social justice that informs a great deal of RTD Doctor Who. It's the same subtext that was at work in Rise of the Cybermen, but it works a lot better here thanks to some context. Setting a Dalek story during the Great Depression is a fundamentally great idea for a series as interested in the disenfranchised as Doctor Who was at the time. Gateway to the New World, the Doctor remarks on seeing Lady Liberty. Give me your tired, your poor, your huddled masses, yearning to breathe free. Yes, but you've given them over. What happens to them? The notion of Hooverville is stunningly well realised, and is a pretty harrowing exploration of the flip side of the American dream. Building off the schemes in Bad Wolf, and perhaps foreshadowing their revelation in The Last of the Time Lords, the Daleks are exploiting man's tendency to exploit man. If the Doctor takes advantage of the best humanity can offer, it makes sense that his enemies prey on the worst. Okay, sometimes it's a little bit on the nose. At one point, Solomon points to the Empire State Building and asks, "But tell me, Doctor, you're a man of learning, right? Explain that to me. There's got to be the tallest building in the world. How come they can do that? We've got people starving in the heart of Manhattan." Of course, even the character names are less than subtle. Wise King of Hooverville Solomon. Mr. Diagra seems to be a reference of Diagus of Rhodes, a successful athlete famously carried on the shoulders of his children, perhaps referenced by the way that Diagoras is building the Empire State Building by exploiting many of his brothers in arms. It's made explicit that both Diagoras and Solomon served in the Great War. Diagonus simply vowed to rise to the top no matter what, while Solomon learned that to survive you have to stick together. As such, Diagonus climbing over his fellow veteran's success seems a decidedly ironic take on the name, and, like Diagonus of Rhodes, he meets his end when he reaches that pinnacle. We're also presented with a community that is easy to prey on for the Daleks. The camp is getting smaller and smaller, and nobody seems to care. When Martha asks if they've gone to the police, Solomon responds, "Yeah, we tried that. Another dead beat goes missing, big deal." Diagonus shows up to recruit from the camp, but it's very clear that his terms are nothing short of exploitation. $1 a day, Solomon asks. That's slave wage. When the Daleks wonder if Diagonus can get to the tower built on time, he concedes unemployment is such an incentive. And while this is true, it just seems a bit over the top to me. While it's hardly the most nuanced view of economic disparity and exploitation, Daleks in Manhattan is a better example of Davies' fascination with social justice than Rise of the Cybermen was last series. Rise of the Cybermen suggested that being rich makes you evil, with Lumic nothing more than a maniacal villain and turning Jackie into a horrible human just because he has a bit of dosh. While Mr. Diagonus is clearly exploiting the people working for him, he's a much more nuanced character than that. Rayner goes out of her way to give him a bit more depth and character development. He gets, of all things, a surprisingly endearing heart-to-heart with a Dalek. It's a scene that probably shouldn't work, but actor Eric Lauren and director James Strong managed to make it sort of touching. We've had wars, he confesses after one of the Daleks opens up about the Time War. I've been a soldier myself, and I swore that I'd survive no matter what. We as the audience understand his point of view, even if he's still a bad person. I do actually really like this sequence, and it's an awesome way of introducing the Daleks to this setting, and the people of it.
The conductor must be complete for our plan to succeed.
Unemployment is such an incentive. It'll get done. Don't worry.
Daleks have no concept of worry.
Yeah? Well, lucky you.
This day is ending. Humankind is weak. You shelter from the dark. And yet, you have built all this.
That's progress. You gotta move with the times, you get left behind.
My planet is gone. Destroyed in a great war. Yet versions of this city stand throughout history. The human race always continues.
We've had wars. I've been a soldier myself. And I swore then I'd survive. No matter what.
You have rare ambition.
I want to run this city, whatever it takes. By any means necessary.
You think like a Dalek.
I'll take that as a compliment.
This human is our best option. Bring him to me. Your loyalty will be rewarded. Come with me. Prepare the laboratory. The final experiment will begin. We obey.
However, the Daleks' exploitation of Diagonus is really the only part of the script that feels appropriately Dalek. The concept of the cult of Skaro is that they think outside the box. They're created to ensure the survival of the Daleks by thinking of radical ideas. They even, as we discovered in Doomsday, have names. This is a great hook for the Daleks. The problem is, quite frankly, Daleks in Manhattan overplays its hand. For one thing, the idea of Daleks actively envying mankind seems strangely out of character, no matter how radical this group might be. Humankind is weak, one confesses to Diagonus. You shelter from the dark, and yet you've built all of this. And that isn't even coming from the leader Sek, the leader who ultimately acts out of weird character envy. After all, if the Daleks can concede that other life has merit, surely they should be able to consider abandoning their own philosophy coming completely, sort of like Dalek Khan does in Journey's End. After all, accepting that other life forms have anything to offer, apart from slave labour or the ability to operate a door handle, seems so aesthetically Dalek, or the Dalek way of life, that it's not Dalek at all. That seems to be the Dalek identity crisis of destiny of the Daleks, wrote larger than life. It's no surprise then that the Daleks are still lost without their next step is to resurrect Davros yet again. Still, this move feels entirely and weirdly at odds with absolutely anything the show has attempted to establish about the Daleks since, well, Dalek. Things don't come completely off the rails here, but it's starting to look a bit ropey. The show's camp sense of humour seems a bit surreal. Of course, there's no reason why Doctor Who can't be camp. but it feels surreal in a show about horrible pigmen. While Doomsday featured a fair bit of Dalek-related humour, it worked in context. After all, the wonderfully bitchy back and forth between the Daleks and Cybermen was swiftly followed by a scene in which the Daleks completely devastated the Cybermen, so there was no sense that the show was diminishing the credibility of the Daleks. Instead, Daleks in Manhattan revels in the camp of the Daleks in such a way that immediately erodes any threat they may pose. It seems that they are more likely to be straight men than galactic conquerors. "You calling me stupid?" one prisoner asks after Daleks grade his intelligence as low. The Dalek responds, "Silence. If it had fingers, it would click at them." Similarly, Tallulah's objection to the classification of Laszlo as having low intelligence undercuts the tension of the scene entirely. There's also a bunch of other stuff here that makes the episode too messy. There's a scene of the homage to 1930s Universal horror that would take root in the next episode. There's also the musical number, which would be pretty nice if only there was a little less happening. The Angel Put the Devil in Me is a nice show-tuney sounding piece of music, but there's so much going on, the moment feels more like a weird slideshow that something should be paying attention to. That said, the whole 1930s theatre angle might have been too much, piled on top of everything else. Furthermore, the guest cast for Daleks in Manhattan actually goes from one extreme to the other. I'll admit that I'm normally wary of Irish and British actors putting on American accents. There's too much room for error if they can't. Miranda Raisin is the only member of the guest cast who seems to have difficulty maintaining her Marilyn Monroe-esque accent. Andrew Garfield, unsurprisingly, does fine. Hugh Koshke also does a great job as Solomon, a role that could be easily trite or cliché, but really isn't. Overall, Daleks in Manhattan is an ambitious adventure, and an okay setup for the next part, Evolution of the Daleks. Already it's a bit overloaded and the cracks are beginning to show. Only in its third season it's becoming clear that the Daleks are going to be a bit of a problem for the future. To be fair, at least the continuity is a bit straighter this time. The story comes completely off the rails in the second half, however, but there's still enough ideas and ambition. I don't want to condemn it out of hand, and there's a lot more to talk about, which we'll get to next time. However, in terms of an overall score, I'm afraid you'll have to